everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of the PHIVE webinar series. This one titled Heritage Heading Towards the Metaverse, VR and Digital Reconstruction. I'm Catherine Ancasti from the University of St. Andrews, and I'm joined here with Jackie Aiken from Timespan in Helmsdale, Scotland, and a few other panelists and PHIVE partners that are going to discuss virtual reconstructions, heritage, VR platforms, learning, all that. So I will introduce Skuli Gunnarsson, who will be introducing the PHIVE project for us. So Skuli.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. And I will share with you a brief introduction to the PHIVE project. And so I'm talking to you here from Iceland, from the east of Iceland, from a cultural center called Skriðuklaustur. And Gunnar Gunnarsson Institute, which I'm managing, is the lead partner of the PHIVE project, which is responsible for this webinar. And because this is the first of 5 webinars, I will give you a brief introduction to the PHIVE project, so which is actually, of course, promoting heritage in virtual environments. And it is, what is PHIVE? It's a Northern Periphery and Arctic program, which is funding the PHIVE project, and it's a clustered project, as it's called, within the program. So we are actually disseminating the outputs from 5 other projects. And it's the Cine project, which was a great 3 years project in the Northern Periphery area, which finished in the end of year 2020. And then it's the Stratus project, which is still ongoing with Icelandic, Norwegian, and Scottish and Irish partners. And the Texholm and the Cubido project is still ongoing as well, with final conference in June. And the ULAC project is also under this and was funded by the Horizon program and finished in 2020. So PHIVE project, we are finishing this project in the end of June, but we have many partners, and so the consortium of all these other projects that are clustered under PHIVE, it's quite big, and so we have here Icelandic, Norwegian, Irish, and Scottish partners, and then associate partners in more countries. And we can talk about 3 pillars of the project. It's the Virtual Center of Excellence, the Virtual Time Travel Demonstration, and the Virtual Museum and Exhibition System. And if we go just very briefly into that Virtual Center of Excellence, that under that we are working on and finding out how to use the VR and ER and AR, virtual reality and the augmented reality, to promote and preserve heritage, not least in post-COVID times. And we want to engage with users with exhibits and workshops, and one part of that is this webinar here today. And we also want to build a network in the NPA area in the Northern Peripheries for digital promotion and preservation for heritage. So those of you who will watch this, please bear that in mind. We are eager to get you on board our network. Virtual time travel demonstration, that pillar is more about the framework for life exploration of the past. And so we are collecting and creating a lot of digital heritage resources. And of course, a lot of that comes from the clustered projects. And then we have been experimenting with live heritage events, and will continue to do so until the end of the project in June, and hopefully after that as well. The Virtual Museum and Exhibition System, that is a repository and system that we are building based on the international image interoperability with, and you can see a bit of that under our website, northernheritage.org. And the idea is to create a kind of a virtual museum of the North, and well, have available for those who want to use it kind of a framework where we are enabling exploration of maps, timelines, virtual tools, objects, and landscapes. You will see a bit of that probably today in a way. So we have 3 specific objectives, and one of that is the network that I mentioned. We want to establish this network to share knowledge and share experience within the northern periphery area, and promote digital infrastructure for live and virtual engagement with heritage. That is just this promotional thing, and we want to carry the light into the darkness of some and let people see how we can actually use these digital tools and benefit from it in the realm of heritage. Building capacity in digital heritage co-production and gamification through workshop toolkits and best practice. That is something that we have been doing and keep on doing in our neighborhood and online as well. Well, we will finish the PHIVE project in Iceland, and so on the 16th June we will have hopefully a very nice and big conference in Reykjavik. It will be a hybrid conference, so those of you who want to participate and join in from abroad and don't have the time to visit Iceland, you can also save the day for this conference. And there we are also planning to establish the network for the future collaboration. And we have just recently sent out the call for proposals. So we have these 5 topics that you can all send us some proposals for nice presentations or under this virtual reality and digital reconstructions, which is actually what we are talking about here today. And then immersive storytelling and game-based approach to heritage, digital preservation, community engagement, and crowdsourcing. It's another topic, and virtual museums, virtual tours, and tourism. So it's the digital heritage that we are talking about, and virtual heritage. And this is the first deadline that we put on the first call there, March 31st, but there is still time for us to think about it after that. Actually, we will send out another call. But that was all about the PHIVE project. So I think we just go on with the agenda for today webinar.
Great. Thank you, Skilly. And actually, the following webinars that we're going to have after this one will be every 2 weeks, but they're following that topic list as well. So if you are interested in maybe putting in a proposal and maybe you're inspired by something that is spoken about in one of these webinars, then there you go. There will be a forum to speak about it in Reykjavik. So submit your proposal. So let's get started then. We are going to speak Jackie. We have Jackie Aiken, myself, David Caldwell is here, and then there's also other five partners that we're going to speak about some of the projects that are incorporated in PHIVE, work that happened that is now feeding into further research and further development and innovation today. So some of them, maybe you've heard about, if maybe you followed some of the other projects, but there's new things happening in developments, and that's due to PHIVE and some other projects. So Jackie, if you'd like to get started and we'll have a chat.
Thanks very much, Catherine, and it's great to be here at the first PHIVE webinar. Ian, could I just ask that you put up our first slide, please? Thank you. So before I start speaking about our reconstruction work, I'll just say, so my name's Jackie Aiken and I'm the Heritage and Digital Curator at Timespan. I'm going to be talking a little bit about today the reconstruction of where I'm sitting at the moment. I'm sitting in the village of Helmsdale in the Timespan building, and we recreated a model of Helmsdale at the height of the herring boom in 1890. And it's that piece of work that I'm going to be speaking primarily about today. But I just want to mention a member of the team who may be listening in, and that's Sarah Kennedy, a member of the St Andrews team, who actually I work very closely with. I being the heritage curator at the museum end, and Sarah being the digital developer and the modeler at the other end. So we work very closely together. So I just wanted to say hi. And but what I would say, even before you begin, so if anybody listening in who's thinking, where do you start when it comes to recreating the past through immersive technology, I'd say basically identify what it is that you want to recreate, and also find out as much as you can about the site itself. It's important that we follow kind of a constructed methodology to make a site or a landscape as accurate as we possibly can. But we can't make it 100% accurate. So it's just as important to address areas where there is insufficient knowledge, insufficient evidence. And we need to address this in the reconstruction process. And this isn't, this is quite common, so don't worry about it, but there's certainly ways and means around dealing with it as well. So that's kind of important to say as well. So don't be too frightened by the prospect. So there's the main types of evidence that we've really used in our timespan St Andrews work for the timespan reconstructions is we've relied quite heavily on archival images, maps, and building plans, but also results from excavations, archaeological excavations, and more science-based data, for example, the results of landscape and pollen analysis. So lots of different disciplines are really contribute valuable information and data into the reconstruction process. So here we are. If you can see on the screen, this is the first Ordnance Survey map dated around, dated around sort of 1876, Helmsdale. And you can see some of the streets and the houses in pink, and you can see it's quite an accurate, one of the first accurate depictions of the villages in the Highlands. So this was a really important piece of evidence, because we weren't just going about reading one or two houses. We went about recreating the whole village of Helmsdale. So Ian, if I can ask you to move now to the an overview. So we've done the reconstruction work on Helmsdale, and hopefully you can see from the OS map to the virtual world reconstruction, it bears hopefully a good resemblance to what was on the map and to what is in the village today. So going about, my job was really going about curating the content. So before any of this could be made, we had to recreate this from the ground up. And so there was lots of different things we had to think about. And I've learned a lot along the way as well. So we looked at evidence for the landscape, the seascape, the buildings, the harbour, down to the objects that are in our museum collection, and even the costumes of the herring gutting girls that appear in the curing yards. So quite a lot of different processes involved in what we did for this model that we can all learn from. If I start at the landscape and the topology, so first of all, we identified the location and how much of the ground, or of the landscape we were wanting to reconstruct. As you can see here, it's quite a lot of it, but we got the main village, we got the boats out at sea. These are the fishing fleets, the herring fishing fleets around 1890. And as you can see here, we started from the ground up. So once I supplied that data to the team at St Andrews, I'm just going to bring Catherine in here very briefly. So what I learned from this process was So at the other end, it was like a blank canvas. So the digital developers needed to use some kind of a mapping, like a contour mapping, to recreate not just a flat surface, but the actual contour of the landscape. Is that correct? Where we actually import the assets into?
Yep. So we're lucky here that we can use lots of different data, but mainly OS terrain data that we can import into a game engine. So all this that Ian's showing is developed in a game engine, which is Unreal for what we use. We use Unreal, and that's the same as any video game that's developed. They're developed in game engines, you know, between Unity, Unreal, and some others. So you have to, because you're working in this dimensional space, you need to have something down. It does start as just a flat plane. You can delineate then the dimensions of it and the development, even in the last, I don't know, I want to say 5-6 years, of how big that terrain can now be. Where we were kind of, when we started back then, you were limited to maybe having a world that you could kind of see the edge of if you had hills or something, but you can go further than that, to now that we can do large expanses. And so, and the natural heritage and the landscape is just as important as putting in the cultural heritage or the built landscape, or the built heritage. So if you didn't have this natural landscape or the correct, accurate landscape to build Helmsdale in, you know, you'd be missing very important parts, because it is down in the shadow of hills, and you have then going back further following the river, you know, you have incredible hills, and then opening out into the harbor, into the sea. So you need to have the most accurate data that you can. So then we then put that in, and then and then exactly what you said, Jackie, you build up.
And it works so effectively as well. So that's quite an important point to make, that, you know, getting the right landscape, sort of the contours of the landscape, is like setting the scene for building up the reconstruction. So Ian, I'd like you to move now to the slideshow I supplied. So just the second slide, if you don't mind, because I'm going to have a little look at the buildings and the harbour. So when it came to, so it's it's the actual slideshow, Ian. So it's the next slide showing some archival photographs. So perfect. Here we go. Lovely. So we were very fortunate when it came to images of what Helmsdale looked like in 1890. As you can see here, so we had amazing photographs. This is the Aberdeen-based photographer, George Washington Wilson, very prolific photographer. And as you can see here, there's such a detail, because these older images are really, really good quality. And we can zoom in, and we can see details of door frames and windows and roofs, and even the boats. We can see the construction process. So we're very fortunate in that respect. Can we move to the second one, the next one along? So this is a local photographer, William MacLeod, as well. What's great about this one is this is really the scene that we've depicted in the reconstruction. So as you look up towards the double arched Thomas Telford Bridge, just on the north side of that is where Timespan's located, and that is the curing yard that we represented in VR reconstruction. But having all this information is hugely important when it came to our research that we did for the reconstruction. And can we move to the next picture? Yeah, so this comes down to building level. As you can see here, the building in the middle, the building, there's low building to the left of the picture with the tiled roof, very low one-story building. That's where I'm sitting at the moment. I'm sitting in Timespan. We were a fish curing yard, a herring curing yard, and our building, our museum, So this is what it looked like in the late 19th century, and that appears in the reconstruction. So could I ask you, Ian, if we could go into the live model now, possibly? Is that if we go back into the live model? So this very area we've depicted. So what we might do, Ian, we might come down onto the street and walk along Shore Street, maybe, if that's possible. And we'll come over to, we'll just have a look at, close-up look at the buildings. So what we were keen to do is we were looking at the construction of the walls. Hopefully, as we come down, we're just going to brighten up just a little bit. It's amazing what you can do in these reconstructions. You can have it all different light tones. So we're looking at the construction of the buildings, the stone that was used, the colour of the stone. Was it a tiled roof? Was it a slate roof? Even the frames of the windows, the lintels above them. And we can look at all this detail, and these buildings can be built up as separate assets. The digital modeler can do this. And it's quite, it's a close relationship between myself working in the museum as the heritage curator and the digital modeler. We're sharing information all the time. We're saying, that's not quite right, or oh, maybe you can make that lintel a little bit longer. And even down to the very detail, as you can see on the doors here, keep trying to elevate that level of authenticity all the time if we have the information available to us. Where we don't, we can use other ways of doing this. We look at comparative sites of a similar age. But I think it's really important that we acknowledge that when we're making our digital models, that this is the process that we followed, and they may not be totally accurate. And the process is as important for some people to know about as the final results. So I think this is really lovely. We've been able to look at the buildings, and if we can maybe turn around. We're just coming down to the herring gutters now and the roofs of the buildings here. We know from our images that the buildings had slate roofs, but the curing yards had red tiled roofs. And we were able to show that level of detail in the reconstruction. And then we can talk about these things as well. So it's really lovely to see this. When it comes to the harbour, we were able to put the boats into the harbour. We were able to show the quayside with steps going down. We were able to show the mooring posts, lots of this detail. And we will come to the herring girls in a minute as well. So that's just a walkthrough of some of the buildings themselves. I might actually change tack here. In fact, if I could just come to to Catherine, and just say, while we're in this area here, because we're going to move over across the river in a minute. In terms of the objects, could maybe I just, you are going to talk about this, but stop there, Ian. That's a perfect example. So quite a few of these images that you see in front, they were in our museum collection. How did they end up in the model?
Well, a progressive, important piece of practice now and museum practice is obviously digitizing collections. What's gaining more traction and attempts being made for more mass digitization is through 3D, because of the importance found of creating 3D digital heritage, not just for archival purposes, but for reuse purposes, and reuse in learning and dissemination, and great, obviously, with research and accessibility to research. And then also in the context of digital reconstructions is that we can put them back into the reconstructions to examine, interpret, interrogate their original context. And even that is uncertain, even that is kind of under the microscope to see, is this, maybe this is how it was used, maybe this is how. So a lot of some of the collections, some of the digitized collections that are seen in the time span reconstructions, most of them, I would say, were done through photogrammetry. Some of them are laser scanned. from the collection. So, and some of them are not on display, correct, Jackie? They're not out, but
correct, yes,
they were incredibly important for some of these reconstructions to add more. When you add more layers of detail, one, you're building up your authenticity potentially, but also but just realism to a degree, believability, and then also putting in collections. You can say, hey, this little teapot, yes, it sits and it looks kind of like a normal little teapot, but actually it was this incredible thing. Or you can have the opposite, where, hey, we have this incredibly celebrated object in the museum collections, and it was just this ordinary piece that was used every day. And that kind of narrative being added to an object's overall narrative, I think is important. And then that just continues and builds and becomes part of the research. Yeah.
And just to say, everyone, that the objects, we just put a collection in front of you so you could see them close up. Obviously they wouldn't have been there, but we just thought it'd be nice for you to see them.
They do look a little big too.
Yeah, but they look lovely. They were but what I'm going to do now is, Ian, could I possibly ask that we go back to the slideshow presentation? So we're going to change tack a little bit. We're going to go back into slightly post-medieval times in Helmsdale. So it's the next slide along. Thank you, Ian. So yeah, as part of the Helmsdale model, although it's dated 1890, in 1890, there was the ruins of a castle sitting on the other side of the river. It was Helmsdale Castle. And as you can see in this photograph taken around 1920s, the castle is teetering on the edge of the raised beach. It dates back to the 15th century, and the castle was actually demolished in 1970-71 to make way for a new road bridge on the A9 heading north. So we wanted to bring back the castle because it was there in 1890 when we were making our model. So could I possibly ask you, Ian, could we go to Kula now to show the photosphere of the castle, please? So we can go into Kula, and it is the it's the fourth one along, if that's okay. And we'll just have a look. So this is another way, maybe Catherine will say, so this is another way of visualizing the reconstruction. It's a 360-degree tour you can have in this online program called Kula. So this is, Ian's just giving us a 360 view. This is Castle Park or Cooper Park, just on the south bank of the Helmsdale River, used for local coups. And if we come around a little bit more, we're going to see what Helmsdale Castle looked like in 1890. So it was a tower house. So in terms of what we knew about the castle, so we could maybe move to the next photosphere. So we're going to get right into the castle now. Yeah. So what we knew about the castle. So we knew a bit about the ground plan. We knew a bit about the size and shape from the Countess of Sutherland did some sketches of it, but there were definitely gaps in our knowledge. So we had to address this. So we looked at other comparative tower houses in Scotland. And from the Countess's sketches, we could see what the roof looked like, and also the internal structure to some degree through comparative study. But this representation is of it as a ruin. And there was one piece in our collection. So if we could go back to the presentation, sorry, I'm skipping a bit, but it will become obvious why I'm skipping a little bit. And the presentation with so it's the next one along. So the only piece from the castle that we had in our museum collection was the castle lintel. And here it is here, embedded in a wall in our museum. But you'd never know that, what it looked like in the castle. And if you could go to the next slide, Ian, right, if you don't mind. So what we did with Sarah, the digital developer, This was a different technique, Catherine. I know that you weren't involved directly with this, but if I could just ask you, this was taking good quality, because unfortunately that lintel was stuck in the wall in our museum. We couldn't get it out to scan it. But you came across a way of taking really good quality photos and then sort of using that around a frame, I believe.
Yeah, so with the technique of photogrammetry, you don't need to get the full object if you can't. Sometimes you can only get 3 sides, you can only get so many sides. But then you can build an actual model to then put the textures on that you have created. So we knew about the rough size of it, we knew about the rough shape of it, and we were able to, just from the photos taken at the museum, which pretty much just was, if you think of like a bit of a half moon, of what you can get with something that's embedded into a plane, into a wall, you get that texture and that shape to a degree, and then be able to build the rest of it. And to put it into this reconstruction, we didn't necessarily need to have the back of it, but we needed to have the overall shape of it. And then once you have it, you can move it, you can model it a bit. So it's combining the actuality of creating the object itself, but then also putting it layered onto a created model object with the same dimensions.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And Ian, if we could go back into the Kula photosphere, so we can actually see. So we took a bit of artistic license here. Obviously, we've got a fire going in a fireplace in the castle in a ruin, but we thought this was the perfect location to tell a really intriguing story about a triple murder plot in this very castle in the 1567. And this triple murder plot around the landowners of Caithness and the landowners of Southern, who were always fighting over land and power. And the events that took place here are thought to have inspired Shakespeare to write his play Hamlet. So there's a wonderful story that we can tell by actually looking at this object that was in our museum without context, and now we've put it back in the museum, and we've even put some poison goblets on top of it as well. So that's another way that VR and immersive heritage reconstructions can be really useful for museum story narratives, whether they're old narratives or whether you want to have new narratives on old objects, changing the narrative and updating them. It's a really good way to do it. Catherine, have I said enough now, or have we got? I mean, it's probably enough, isn't it, for now? Shall we leave it there for now? And if there's time, we can go back to the curing yard. Or
sure, if you want to. That's what do you want to do, Jack? Do you want to go back to the curing yard?
Yeah, we'll do it very quickly, and then we'll do it very quickly. So what we could do here is just go into the real life model, Ian. And if we could, because I think people would like to see what time span looked like. So we're going to enter the curing yard. This is a place where women worked in teams, where they gutted the herring and they salted them to preserve them. They were barreled up, and a lot of them were exported. So we're going into the workstation of where all this is happening. Oh, that's a great image, Ian. The interesting thing about where we got the evidence to recreate, if you could just leave it there for a minute, Ian. So where we got the evidence to recreate all these features, you're probably thinking, well, how do you know it looked like that? And there's very scarce survivals of buildings associated with the Scottish fisheries, because when you think about it, once the demise of the Scottish fisheries in terms of the herring industries, a lot of these buildings were demolished or they were reused. And certainly a lot of these working platforms, these working ground surfaces quickly got covered up. But we're very lucky down at the harbour, there's still one of the Sutherland Estate red herring houses. And would you believe it, it's still got its cobbled surface. And when I was down there, we were able to record the areas, the drainage channels, there's a well as well, and also the stances where the tables were. So we had that level of evidence, which was really good to give us some authenticity to what we were reconstructing. We use many other avenues as well, comparative sites, even objects that were found that were related to these buildings. And of course, places like the Wick Museum, where it was another importing herring port, they still have a lot of their evidence that survives, so we were able to utilize that as well. Most importantly, community input. The memories of people in your local community are hugely important when it comes to reconstruction. They have objects, they have stories, they know what the buildings look like if they're not here anymore. I had a lady coming in who sat down and she said, oh, it's great to see the house where I was born in. It's in your model, but it's demolished now and I can't talk about it. But you've got it in your model and I can chat about it. So I was absolutely delighted. She was able to talk about her family who were involved in the fishing industry, because we actually had the house where she was born in our model. The other important thing we're doing time span as well is looking at the Highland history, and certainly the Scottish fisheries was very much a part of that. In the early 19th century, herring that were caught and salted at Helmsdale were part of that transatlantic fishery to the slave colonies in the West Indies. And we do know there's documentation that Helmsdale was involved in that, and the other fishing ports in the Highlands as well, in the 18th and early 19th centuries. Once emancipation took place in 1834, the predominant exports were to the Baltic countries. So we can tell an awful lot about the impact of one curing yard can tell you about world history and the impact on such important aspects of our heritage and acknowledgement of our part in the transatlantic slave trade as well. But also we want to represent the women in our historical narratives and the role of the independent-minded herring gutting teams that travelled the length and the breadth of the country from Shetland down to Wick Helmsdale and down to Greater Yarmouth that were involved in the herring trade. It's amazing, Catherine, what you can do in one little model, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Well,
but I will leave it there. There was just, I know that you will talk about 3D objects, but certainly we've got the Cooper at the back of the model, and some of the objects that we did scans of are in this model. That's correct, isn't it, Catherine?
Right. Well, let's go to it. Let's talk about it now then, since we're on in the reconstruction. So, because that's one of the things that you can do once you have digital media and once you have built this digital reconstructive environment and space. And look, Jackie's got it.
Can you see it?
Yeah. So.
And it's sitting on the basket.
There you go. So you're able to, once you've digitized the object, like the objects that we put in but had just out, this is back into a theorized, and our best is, we know what it is, we know what it's for, and then we're putting it back into our best guess scenario of how it would have been used. So it is, well, you know about it, Jackie, it's a Cooper Cruzy, but here, here's your Cooper, he's making the barrels, here's part of his toolkit. We've put the toolkit back into the context and into the environment of where he would have used it, as opposed to just seeing the 3D or the actual object sitting on a shelf or sitting under, a little interpretation text box or something. So you can, that opens, like I said before, that opens a whole can of worms with some objects of, what would it have been used for if we're not sure, and how it would have been used, who would have been using it. Was this one used? You might not, maybe it's one, a lot of things that, and this as an archaeologist, Jackie, a lot of things that we find that are whole were not really used. The ones that are broken are usually the ones that are really rough. were the ones that were actually the good ones, and they were used until they were done. So you never know. But yes, so we're able to put that digital media when it is created back into a digital domain, into the virtual realm, and then be able to have a lot more interesting discussions about it, I think. Especially when you don't know, it is a bit of an audit. It is a bit of a, well, we don't really know. We think we know, but maybe by putting it back into a potential context, you can examine it in different ways. And that can be from anything of 3D objects to then a whole structure, to landscapes as well. So, and rebuilding landscapes to maybe what they were prior to a certain point in time or something. So yeah, I think it adds so much to a physical object. So.
And I think you're absolutely right, that idea of adding not just perfect objects, but broken objects. I mean, we live in a world purely of broken, mended, fixed, so the idea that reconstruction is a perfect world is not true. Roofs are repaired, walls are repaired, show the dirt, that's the kind of thing that I think, helps people connect with visualizations as well.
And makes it more authentic, because when things are a bit too clean or a bit too orderly or a bit too flat, I've had that comment before, was, obviously people will build on flatter places, but not necessarily. And that's something that in some of the reconstructions you need to take note of, especially if you do have that terrain data, to make an accurate landscape. To, if it's built on a hill, build it on the hill.
Absolutely. Getting into the mindset of the people that live there, absolutely, as well. Cool. No, that good. Thank you very much. I think that's my
Great. Well, then I have a presentation, but I'm going to jump through it a little bit just and to comments as well on some things that Jackie's already touched on. And yeah, so if you skip down, Ian, to the 4th slide. Something that you mentioned early on, Jackie, was that, as kind of to anybody who's interested in taking on a digital reconstruction project, or to do something that will then involve building an environment, a virtual environment, don't be, upset if you don't have a ton of information, or if you don't feel like your information is wholly complete. I think another one of those things is have as diverse a group of people involved as possible, because the more backgrounds and diverse voices coming into it creates something that it is a bit more, or probably the best creation that you can create. So coming from our Open Virtual Worlds group, the University of St. Andrews, where programmers obviously spoke about Sarah and digital modeling, but then, yeah, digitizers, but then also I'm a museum background. We have a historian, we were able to create the characters from somebody, to rig the characters and actually do the movements that the Herring Girls would be doing. And then also then the costuming, and having somebody who's knowledgeable of clothing of that era, to make not just the structures and the objects, but people as accurate as possible. So having that kind of a background, I think, and adding community voices, because we're talking a lot about academic research and academic audit, and having an archival evidence and hard data. But like you said about the woman that was born in the house that was demolished, who else is necessarily going to have that information? It may not be recorded anywhere. So even though it might be informal, even though it may be anecdotal, that is valuable material, especially within known memory. Obviously, when you can have interpretations farther and farther down the line, but those are also good stories to tell. Just like the murder plot and how it's maybe tied to Hamlet. Is it? We don't know, but it's a great story to tell and to connect then with the physical heritage. So, and I'll just mention about, why these virtual environments, reconstructions are well placed for heritage and for museums. Inherently, museums are places for informal learning and informal discussion. And so that create platforms or create forum for experiential and collaborative learning. And so when you have these virtual spaces, you can tap into that, because maybe an object in a museum, you can't maybe do too much with it other than look and read about it. But when you place and have a interactive, completely immersive, open world, there's all of a sudden so much more that you can do singly with one person, with a group, passive, actively. So, and then through the ways that you do that, the platforms that you do that, you can then apply or tap into your audience's digital literacies. As personal commodity technology is just ongoing and just further developing, it's always faster, there's always something happening. Our own digital literacies are right there with that. So being able to offer content on the platforms or through the channels that people are interested in, and maybe don't realize they're interested in, because I bet a lot of people that would come to a museum and see maybe a VR headset might go, oh no, I don't know about that. But once you give it a try or offer another way, then that's an interest peaked. So next slide, Ian, if you could. I'm just going to jump through these a little bit. So I'm going to touch on the elements of virtual reconstruction, but we did kind of speak about that, Jackie. But the different methods of heritage dissemination, I think, is important, because we're talking about, we have this reconstruction, but then how do you then employ it in the best way possible, or in the ways that you are kind of restricted by, or maybe the best ways for the content or the interaction you wish to have. So if you can go next slide, Ian. So we did talk about the different ways, the different things that come into creating a digital reconstruction. And like we were talking about building it up, this is literally how sometimes it's built, that how Sarah builds it. You have all the terrain, you add all that in, but then if you have a map and you can scale the map, literally putting it down like a blueprint to then build it up to be as accurate as possible, but then also to know where everything is in relation, so you're not just taking a stab in the dark. And that's fabulous. And that's when, if we do have that kind of primary research of maps, sometimes they're maybe not to scale, but you can, with the terrain and maybe some identifying features, you're able to assume where things would go. So yeah, talking about the expert local knowledge, terrain surveys, and then anything modern as well can help you if you're lacking in a certain area and you need to, capture some drone footage to be able to get a coastline a little bit, if that's different, or you need the modern, anything modern can help you as well. So, okay, next slide. We talked about this. And talking about then adding any additional assets as layering authenticity and adding layering believability as well. Because if we have left this interior, this is of the longhouse, if we left it bare, you get an idea of the interior, the shape of it, and maybe you'd be able to really look at the construction of it, but you wouldn't understand the context of living in it, maybe. But by adding objects that are associated with that time and with that reconstruction, whether they are actual digital collections from a museum, sometimes assets are available to you just in the game engines, store. People build 3D models so you can use them, and that saves up a lot of time. But adding that in for a bit more, oh, okay, I can imagine people living in here. And then the next step further is actually having, you know, people in it. But then we have what, there's one, two, three objects. Is it three, Jackie, that are in the single picture that are from your collections, and then plus additional potential objects that would have been in there. And one of them being the Bogwood, the Sutherland chair right in front of us, which is,
yeah, what's great about that is that defines this identifies this as a Sutherland longhouse, you know, by maybe not so much the construction, although that's very important, but in the interior, it's got a Sutherland vernacular chair in it, you know, and that's actually was in our museum. And yeah, so this was amazing to do this with it.
And gives the structure of the chair context as well, because when you look at the chair in person, and you can from this view, you can't really tell, but in the model you would be able to. But in real life, the chair is really small and it's really short. And you go, oh, doesn't look very comfortable. Like, is that a child's chair? It's, you know, but when you put it back into the reconstruction, you're able to look at it. You then are able to have that discussion. Well, it's short and squatty because then it keeps the people under the smoke. You know, the smoke is going up from the fire, but you don't want to sit up tall and you're kind of like breathing in all that smoke. So it's shorter. So then you're warm, but then not having all the smoke up in your face. And then you're like, all right, that makes sense. That gives me a little bit more knowledge than, you know, just reading it on a text panel or something. So, all right, if you can go to the next one, Ian, and then the next one. Sorry, I hid all these slides, but apparently they're all there. So some of the, so in ways in which we can have, or dissemination can happen with heritage is obviously the first one being just in the museum. So having the platform of having an exhibit in a museum, and this is an example of a multi-leveled VR exhibition for the Tom and Toole and Glenlivet Discovery Center, based on or using a VR headset, but then also having a passive screen as well that mirrors what the viewer is seeing in the VR headset. So then just like the viewer is able to experience full immersion, near full immersion with the headset on, an active or a passive group behind them can join in experiencing it, whether they want to experience it with the headset or they kind of do a secondary activity where maybe they know the person doing and they tell them what to do or go to explore or go act and go do this. And that's kind of a very expected method of dissemination within the museum's walls. Next slide, Ian. You can take it outside. I mean, it is on a computer and that's actually time span that we're running outside. Next slide, Ian. I'll just go through these quickly. And then as how do I want to say this? A larger exhibition. So not necessarily one exhibit, it can be a full exhibition. So this example just being the Perth Museum for Pix and Pixels with Pictish reconstructions, but it was almost like a half and half layered full exhibition with digital materials and the actual artifacts, but then it gives it the layering within a physical space of, ooh, I've seen this and now I'm seeing it in the virtual reconstruction as well, but then the object is right here. And so there's a little bit more of an immediate tie-in with the physical and then the virtual. Next slide, Ian. So it brings me to one of the projects that has been involved with, let's say, Cupido. Cupido project was Finn Lagan, the Lord of the Isles, which we have like the expert on here with us today, David. But I wanted to talk about it just because it was a reconstruction that there's a lot of archaeology, a lot of work that's gone into this, but there's still a lot of questions, and then there's still a lot of interpretation that was was still being questioned, and then having the reconstruction starts to kind of make you, it's that audit of information, that of audit of research to figure out what we do know and where those places are. Ooh, there could be a little bit more. And also then development, because this was done prior to the pandemic, the first iteration, and then now is in another development, just because there is more to tell. There are more stories to tell. There are more things to explore and to figure out what that would look like. And then also with how it's presented and how it's disseminated is inherent to where it is as well. So you do have the museum there, but then also to allow exploration out onto the islands and out onto the site. So David, if you want to have a chat and have a discuss about Finlagen. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Right, you'd like me to jump in now, would you?
Sure.
Right, okay. So I'm the expert, Kathleen said it. I am the expert on Finlagen, which means I've learnt after long years of being involved in these things that I'm certainly not the best person to whose advice should be taken in trying to understand what a place like this is really about. I won't necessarily see the wood for the trees or ask the right questions. And one of the main things I've learned after a career of 38 years as a curator and as an archaeologist is that it's often other people, interested members of the public, who ask the questions that make you think, oh, why didn't I think of that? And that would make such a difference to my understanding and a way of explaining the site if I had. Now, Finlagen is 2 islands, as you see in this reconstruction, in an inland loch in the island of Isla. And we undertook research excavations there on behalf of the National Museums over 7 years in the 1990s. And we were attracted to the place, which is almost nothing upstanding, by the way. It's just a lumpy, bumpy site with, what might be the ruins of buildings on it. And we were attracted to it because we believed that this was an important centre, the centre of quite a significant lordship, or what you might actually have called a kingdom, really, in the Gaelic and Irish world. The Kingdom of the Isles, the lords or the kings were the MacDonalds. And it was almost, in a European context, it was almost like a Burgundy. It could have become a separate kingdom, but it didn't quite make it. But it's of great importance, it seems to me, for us Scots in terms of the contribution it made to our heritage. So much of what we think of now as being Scottish, the obvious things like whiskey and bagpipes and tartan and dancing and so on, in many ways, a lot of that actually originates in the culture that was prevalent under the lordship of the Isles in the 15th century. And our hunch about the site proved to be correct, which isn't always the case with archaeology. My contention is that in the excavations, we did discover enough evidence to show that this really was an important centre of a major lordship, and one which was rather different from such centres elsewhere in Europe. We're not dealing here with a large town. We're not dealing with a church or streets with houses along them to a great extent. There's no reason why that shouldn't have been there, if you see what I mean. There was certainly the infrastructure, the people, the climate, and the ability to grow crops. It could have supported Finlagen being a town or a borough in some way as a centre, but that's not what was required or how things developed. And in a way, that's one of the fascinations about it. Is this an alternative model of civilization, if you like, an alternative model to what was happening in most of the rest of Europe? And why was that? So when we started finding bits and pieces in the excavations or the traces of buildings, we were always thinking, well, are these like buildings elsewhere? Were they constructed differently? What about all these bits of pottery and other sort of things that we're finding? Are these local? Or do they actually reflect what was happening in the wider Europe, and what is the significance of that? And those are the concepts, the things which in a way we're still working on. I'm not going to give you an answer in this talk, by the way, because I don't know what the final answer is. And in a way, that's one of the fascinations about this work that we're involved with, that my colleagues in St Andrews University have done such amazingly good work on. And a great deal of credit for the understanding of Finland is due to them, and despite me as the experts, I might say. So it's an ongoing process. We'll probably get lots of things wrong. And in a twisted sort of way, I hope we are, because if you don't get things wrong, you don't learn. And they are expert in what they do as well. But you know, what I really hope we will get out of this is being able to present this to a wider international public. And there's a great deal of international interest in this, because you know, this is all about the McDonald's and other West Coast clans and those aspects of Scotland that people so much love and delight in. It's only if we get things wrong that people might say, well, why did you do that? Or don't you think it was something different? And this reconstruction here, which shows the inside of the Great Hall. Now, this was the main building on the main island in the 15th century. When you were approaching the site, this is what you'd have seen sticking up. Great hall with a slate roof and dressed stones round the windows and the doorways. And in a way, it's symbolic of something quite important, that what made a great man in this world was his ability to entertain. It was all about, you know, inviting other people along and feasting them till they sunk under the table and had to be carried away. That was your ability to give gifts, your ability to entertain. That was what was so important. And when you look at reconstructions like this, it's not all fantasy. Some of it is, and there's nothing wrong with fantasy or playing with things. A lot of it is actually based on objects and information that we discovered from the excavations. You can, you know what a whole vessel looked like, where it came from, what it contained, just by finding a small sherd of it. And that is the basis of some of this. One of the things which I'm personally quite proud of in a twisted sort of way is that you'll see that my colleagues have put round the walls here tartan with cloth. Now, I'm sure a lot of my colleagues think this is absolutely corny. Tartan? You must be kidding. That's a 19th century thing, all this stuff about people wearing kilts and stuff. Well, no, actually. There is a lot of good information that the weaving of tartan, the wearing of tartan plaids, does go back quite a long time in this part of the world. And there is documentary evidence for there being a farm on Isle, a sheep ranch, if you like, that produced lengths of plaid as a render for the holding of the land. So we've found possible, incidentally, some rings which might have held up hangings. We could have gone to European sort of sources and put up, you know, beautiful tapestries like those that survive in other museums, but maybe they didn't prize that. Maybe they would have put up tartan. So it's an idea, and maybe a few years down the road, I'll think, oh dear, why did we do that? But at the moment, I think this is a splendid idea, and we hope that people will engage with it. And if they think it's terrible, they'll tell us, or if they can come up with better evidence, they're welcome. That's what we want to hear. I don't have a monopoly of the best ideas and information. And one of the things which I did say just a few minutes ago, I talked about great men and what they did. Men. And that's what we talk about so often, especially on sites like this. Men. But there must have been women and children. And that's one of the things I'm most desperate to try and understand about a place like Finland. where are they? Where are they? Where are the women and children? It's actually quite, we found bits of armor, we found weapons, we found things which we tend to think that men have and do. But there's very few artifacts, or practically no artifacts, from a place like Finlaggan or many other in the medieval world, where we can say, you see that? That is definitely a woman. Not even the brooches. When we found brooches, but we can't say for definite that these were gender specific. So that is one of the challenges. And I want the reconstructions, I want the output to reflect that, because it's probably not going to be me that comes up with an answer for this, or how we've failed to actually find these women. I hope it's going to be the people who actually avail themselves of all these this virtual world we're creating for them, who go around the site, and hopefully somebody will say, why did you not actually see this? And I hope that I will be shown to be wrong in that very constructive way. So it's been a great experience doing this. We've had the benefit of people who understand a lot about contemporary costume. We do have representations, incidentally, on local sculpture, and we do have some artifacts that are costume fittings. So we've got a basis, a good basis for doing reconstructions of this type, which is very much work that is ongoing. And we've, as a result of doing all this work too, we I think have changed the emphasis of what we think about at the site, at least what I think about the site. You know, I've veered significantly from seeing this as a place where big men did big things, and it was all about going out there and fighting battles and showing that they were in control over wide areas. To actually understanding and reassessing some of the documents that we have, which actually do things like mention the importance of hunting. And we have found in the excavations various fittings which we think we can identify as dog collars. Okay, we actually have a praise poem about one of the people who lived at Finlaggan, which describes how he inherited his dog leashes and his hunting dogs from his father. And we have, I think, quite a telling remark about a Lord of the Isles, later Lords of the Isles in the 15th century, if you like, which says that even though the Lord was away at his hunting, the business of government, the business of making decisions and legal things went on at Finlaggan. And that, in a way, I think, is a very interesting thing to hang on to in terms of trying to understand what was happening here. It's a whole new, exciting world for me opening up. When I was in the National Museum that employed me, we did put on a little display of the stuff from Finlaggan. We put out a photograph of the place, showing it in ruins. We put some broken bits and pieces in the case and said, this is a broken this and this is a broken that. Quite an important site in the 15th century, end of. This is very much better and more interesting. And I'm really, really proud, actually, that I've had the opportunity to work with these people and develop this. And there's a lot more stuff to be done.
Well, thank you, David. It's, from discoveries and findings and research and writing up from publications from you guys as well that help us build these and help us move forward in our innovation as well. And on that point of the juxtaposition of the NMS display and then, of a reconstruction like this, it's all of a sudden it adds so much more. And even looking at our band members here that are all in, it's just a funny row of our characters, but it's so colorful, and that's sometimes that we forget from seeing physical objects, that might have just been in the ground for a long time. So of course they're going to be dark and brown, but you know, that there were people and there was people living here, and you know, they wanted to have the nicest things, or they were quite connected, you know, to the rest of Europe. And so then they were able to trade and get other things. So it all of a sudden you can start having those conversations and start having those, you know, stories, narratives, that shows them as humans, as people, as opposed to just people of the past. You know, they hunkered down in their stone buildings, that's all they did. So, and I think too, with inherently with Finlagan, is that, like you said, David, that it's two little islands. You know, it's just a little bit into this as a sea lock, right? And or is it a full lock? I can't remember, but
the freshwater lock, since you mentioned it.
Yeah, I remember the story that they would have to have anybody visiting pull up their boats far off away, and then they have to kind of march a bit into where Finlagan was located, which helped with the grandeur and helped with the eminence of, like, hey, you're coming to us. You can't just rock up with your boat and your men and your, you know, and intimidate us. No, you gotta hike it up to us. But it is, you know, you have the visitor center, but it is a walkway to walk out, and there are some ruins, but it's a lot of moundy dirt, right, or moundy ground. So being able to, and that's one of the methods with Finlagan, is that it is available in an app, mobile application, because if you take it out with you on your own phone, you're able to stand in the context, like in the environment, in the landscape, of where this all would have been. And yes, of course, it's a bit different now, because obviously lots of time has passed, and maybe the actual land masses of the island are a little bit smaller, maybe, but it gives you the realization that people lived here. This is where this building, oh, I'm standing in this building, and I'm walking down the pathway, and oh, this is where they would have kept their livestock, or oh, this is where this would have been. And it just gives a bit more realism to, even though it's 15th century, you know, it's so far in the past, it gives, you can see it, and you're, oh, okay, this is where they would have lived. And, you know, this ruin would have been this full structure and would have been the grand hall, you know, and quite grand. So I think as that Finlagan lends itself to that form of method of dissemination, of out with the museum, you know, beyond the walls of a museum, that you can discover and explore in the landscape, because that is the closest that you'll get to really, really understanding this time period in this moment in time. And that's why I put this here in this part of the presentation, just because then, you know, that you do have a museum-based exhibition, but the addition of being able to take it out and be there with the, you know, with 360 photospheres, and being able, with interpretation in it, are able to learn on the ground. And I think that's something that's unique, but not, you know, that is pertinent and should be a bit more explored more with sites and landscapes and archaeology. So then your reconstruction then can go back actually out into the wild, as it were. So thank you, David. Let's see, but the next slide, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll just briefly talk about like most accessible. Ian, if you could go to the next slide. So having, next one. We'll just, yeah, we're gonna bounce through these. I deleted these. I don't know what's happening, but if you could go through, please, Ian. But a lot of but let's say you have a museum-based exhibition, but then, you know, you might have something that's a bit more you can have out in the landscape, like Finlagan. But the most accessible, the easiest way is having just content on an online platform. So us looking at Kula, that is one method of building your own exhibition, almost your own interactive. through online deployment, but then also through social media, like archiving platforms, being able to put 3D models onto Sketchfab and having interpretation and annotations. You can keep going in. That lets you be able to share that widely through digital channels, online digital channels. So I would think that one of the things that you can stay on there. Oh, I'm showing everybody, Jackie, Schooly. I think one of the things that the restrictions that we were put under with COVID and kind of the exploration of virtual and digital domain is that I think the most, like, what am I trying to say? I'm saying the greatest audiences that saw all these reconstructions were through those platforms, through online platforms, through this format of live webinars, live discussions, where you can bring in a panel of people and experts, and then also go through it live at the same time. And I think being able, that's accessible in the way that you just need internet. So you don't need a certain, you can do it on different kinds of devices and hardware. You don't have to download an app. You don't have to have a museum-based exhibition with a VR headset. VR anyway covers quite a lot, and immersion covers quite a lot. So being able to disseminate that in a spectrum of different ways, from a tour like this and to talking through experts, all the way into a full open explorative environment through a VR headset, is the spectrum that you can cover and that you can do once you have created a virtual environment. And I think acknowledging the very highest and furthest point of full immersion and exploration and the open world, to then all the way back, because you want to just have the one thing, which is access. So that's just kind of what this image demonstrates. So you can go on, Ian. And so, and using platforms, leverage the platforms that are available, like Kula, like Sketchfab, to be able to get that material out as far as you can. This is another project Downpatrick had through the Stratus project. And there's a big webinar as well, and workshop next week about this with County Mayo. But being able to then bring that reconstruction through the tour, it's also through an app, but it's then reinvigorating and telling multiple stories in multiple time periods. So using those platforms of both out in the landscape, but then also being able for people to do it at home. Because one thing that's been shown is that you may not be able to go, the access may be restricted for multiple reasons, but bringing the experience to people then it just deepens the learning, deepens the extending arm that a museum has to disseminate their heritage. So I'll end on that. That's profound. So I'm going to open it up. There's a few other people here from PHIVE as well, and Jackie, if you have anything to say, or if you have points to say, let's talk about them. Or if there was anything else you wanted to say too about your models, Jackie. I'll open the floor, Scully or anybody.
Well, I mean, it's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed listening to yourself and David speak about the Finlagen model as well, and especially so when I first came to be involved in digital reconstruction, so to me, research is really important, whatever research it might be. And if you do research, the first thing, I think you kind of in a way said it, David, you find out what you don't know rather than what you do know, which is the most important thing in a way. And to be able to do that, to be able to pinpoint that is really important. And I think these models are a great platform to show archaeological landscapes and objects and things like that, but they're great to discuss how we do our research, how we actually go about researching our history, our heritage, our prehistory, and actually becoming wider in the way that we include information and data from other disciplines. The world of scientific exploration in archaeology has just unbelievable. There are so many disciplines for all types of materials, all types of objects, dating, whatever it might be, analysis of landscapes. As I said, pollen analysis. You know, what a was something a dried up riverbed that's now where people build their houses, which is now demolished. All that information is you know, something that we can really utilize within VR reconstructions, because you can go under the surface, you can go through time, you can have layers, you can time travel, you can talk about the soils, you can talk about the stars, you know, it's all there. So I think certainly for me, you know, I've been amazed at where I've gone for information, and actually it has increased my knowledge of what's available out there in terms of what type of knowledge is useful for these models. And you know, when we started, our group was kind of small, the experts, and I include in the experts our community groups, which is a huge expert body of knowledge. And you're absolutely right, David. I'll give you one example of where our community group straight away looked at our curing yard model, and straight away our visitors said, what happens in a curing yard? Okay. And then our community group said, why haven't you put the herring gutting girls in the curing yard? Which was the most obvious thing. But when we first made the model, we had no people in it. So people struggled to understand we know what a curing yard is, but they didn't know what a curing yard was. And they were going, what activity is it? So activity is hugely important. Maybe not just show an object, but show the object in use, or what you think, how the object was used. Maybe we can use it to sort of work out. You might have one object from an Iron Age roundhouse, but you can show different ways of how you think it was used. So I have learned a huge amount, and I think it's valuable not just for our disciplines, but it's very valuable for other disciplines as well. But community voice is the great grounder, and it definitely gives us a lot of the direction that we need in terms of not being too tunnel vision in terms of the types of research that we use, and yeah, and making it available on multi-platforms as well. We have older people that don't digitally engage a lot. We have digital poverty. You know, there's so many things that I think we can address with this type of reconstruction. It's very therapeutic as well. I've looked, there's lots of ways that digital reconstruction can be a safe place, you know, where people find it very therapeutic being part of that environment and can meet other people in it in a safe way. So yeah, I mean, sorry, just lots of different things that have come to mind.
Scully, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I'm really happy with the presentations here and the discussion, and I think they actually draw the core from what actually is, we have with the virtual reality and using the digital reconstruction of the past. I mean, as Jackie was saying, I mean, more and more people have been interested in this project there in Tangespan and in Helmsdale. It is a very, very good model of of this, how you can use and to build the past, and actually the story about the lady who actually saw her old home there, which had been demolished, is really interesting, and it shows you how many well, things you can actually get from building the past like this in the virtual worlds. And I think from the experience that we have here at Skriðuklaustur, where we have not as detailed reconstruction of the monastic buildings that were here at the time of the lords of Finlegen in the 15th and 16th century. We have experienced here how our guests of all generations enjoy to use the Oculus headsets and walk and fly actually into the past and see all these buildings based on the evidences that we have from the archaeological excavation, but also just from our fantasies and other. And so, but what we see from that and learn from that is that the new generations, the younger generations, are really it helps them to visualize the past, I would say. The generations that are, in their 20s, even 30s, they are used to video games and things like that. And this is just an important media that we can use to get them interested in the past and in the heritage. And that is always the goal, our goal, who are working with the cultural heritage. That is how we can actually get more people to get interested and know the history and learn about their ancestors. And I think digital reconstruction and virtual reality is a fabulous way to do that. And the most important way, for example, here, where we have the ruins of the monastic buildings just on site, it's very hard for people to realize how big actually they were, even though they have the structure of it there in front of them. But when we put them into the virtual reality, they realize that, okay, yeah, there were so many rooms, and the church was that big. And so it's an important tool also for those who are guiding on site and in the museums. So we can use it along with our storytelling and as a tool to visualize the past. Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too with Skriðuklaustur is that you have you have your monastic ruins that are very, you have the foundation and it's very flat. But then you have incredible archaeological finds, so many finds that kind of you need to marry the two to see how then people lived and really kind of grasp that it was a quite well, for a period of time, but a living, breathing community there that, they lived, they prayed, they did, they lived there. So, and I think having the 3D objects then placed back into the reconstruction, and then the reconstruction itself ties those two can be very disparate things together to make a whole of the reconstruction and give kind of a glimpse into that past. But absolutely. I'm aware of the time. We were going to say it was just going to go for an hour and a half. So I will, if anybody has anything last to say, say it now. But otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up, and we will, well, before I say anything, does anybody have anything else they'd like to mention? No, shaking of hands. Well, I'll go ahead and mention then that we will have another webinar in 2 weeks' time. And I forget the date of it, but is that, Scully, is that the storytelling? I believe.
Yeah, it would be the immersive storytelling.
Yeah. So Same place, same time, 2 weeks time. But we will continue and we'll have a series of 5. So thank you for everyone here that has joined. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, David. Thank you, Skilly, everybody else that's here, but then everybody who's listened. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.